record.
Welcome back to our third part of the analysis of the Kalos Division. Today we've got the last 6 teams on the list, and I've got with me the wonderful Chulainn.
Hey.
And R.EX as well.
Welcome.
Who of course is also pretty wonderful. And we are going to go through this list a bit differently than the previous times because we noticed we were speaking quite a lot and the videos became kind of lengthy. So we decided to go on the matter of this and kind of split the teams between us. So instead of all of us speaking in detail about every team, we will now have one person dedicated to 2 teams, so to speak. And all of us are going to comment on 2 teams in more detail, and then the others can kind of add on with stuff that they think we're missing. But overall, we will just go over the point grades in the end, if it's not the team that we are detailing. And otherwise, just, as I said, add some details here and there, maybe. So, without further ado, I would say let's get this thing started. And I think the first of us to speak about a team is Chulainn.
No, we start with the Naganadels, aren't we?
Yeah, and me is the first to have the honor to speak about the Naganadels. But thank you.
So be it.
So thank you, sweet Candyman Kev the Dev. So I will start today and talk a little bit about the Venomous Naganadels. First and foremost, I have to say I kind of like the team very much. There are some points I'm missing things, but I like the team because I think overall it has a good synergy. It's one of the few teams that have, in my opinion, a very good trick room mode and can, positioning in trick room very good. But besides of that, it doesn't need that. So the ones they have, especially Ferrothorn and Snorlax, and even though Everlock, doesn't need to be in trick room to make some work. But they like the trick room, of course. But I will start with the G-Max here, and it's the G-Max Orbital. I think it's kind of underrated. G-Max Orbital has a nice effect to set Gravitas with this signature G-Max move. But overall, I think Orbital is a very solid one to set Trick Room, to support the team, because it's very bulky. It has a nice speed here. So it's very fast. You would assume it's a very slow bug node. It's very fast, but because of that, it doesn't has to be to set a trick room to make some work. So I think I like that G-Max pick because this gives them some points to do double tier 1 picks in the free tiers. But the first tier 1 pick they did was Tapu Koko. I think Tapu Koko is an awesome Pokemon to have in a draft league because this 130 speed is very good as a speed tier to peak, because there is not a lot of Pokemon left. They have a higher or a nearby speed. So you have Regieleki, of course. You have maybe Pheromosa, Dragapult, and so on, and Crobat. But overall, Tapu Koko with the terrain set is very awesome in my opinion. And it can be physical, it can be special, it can support the team as well if they want to. They have the pivoting effect as well with Volt Switch and some sort stuff. And what I do like here is they have a kind of a synergy with another one they picked in tier 3, which is Electivire, because it has the motor drive ability. And you can imagine you can just discharge with Tapu Koko, for example, and trigger the motor drive ability of Electivire, so its speed increases, so it can work in a higher speed tier and does a lot of cool stuff, because Electivire is a very good Pokemon. It has a good a physical attack stat, a good speed tiering, relatively okay bulk in my opinion, a nice move pool. It's very wide, and you can do a lot of good things with it. You have to position it very right, but I think the synergy between Tapu Koko and Electrify is very awesome. Then they have in tier 2 the Gengar. So another Trick Room setter, if you want to, and another weakness to Ghost and Dark, which is kind of weird, and to Ground. So, so the synergy between those four is weakness-wise kind of odd in my opinion, but they have a very high speed tiering with that, because Gengar can do a lot of things as well. It can support, it can be a special offensive weapon if they want to. They can set a Trick Room, they can Will-O-Wisp, and to maybe pair up that a little bit better, they have picked Silvally in tier 2, which I kind of like, because I wanted Silvally as well to draft, but yeah, I needed to drop that thought or this idea because they sniped us. I kind of like Silvally in the draft format, because it can have every typing with the special item, and because they boosted the signature move from the damage output, it's, I think, more viable, even though the stats are just mediocre. I mean, 95 on every stat is fine, but it can set up as well with Sword Stance, and it can do a lot of damage if you not be aware of it. And they picked in tier 3 Morgrem. So they have a Prankster user as well here. The second Fairy type. A Dog type at least now, so they have something to counter or they have a switch in for Dog type moves here. Besides, they have Tapu Koko. And the Prankster Morgrem here is kind of nice, because they can fake tears, they can fake out, they can Thunder Wave, for example, so support their Tapu Koko and Gengar a little bit better, and even though the Orbeetle. And they can proc a Weakness Policy, for example, with Sucker Punch and such things. So, mode-wise, the synergy is kind of cool in my opinion. Type-wise, it's kind of odd, to say it at least. In tier 4, they picked the Lycanroc Midnight. I think because the tier 4 is kind of trashed here, just in my opinion, Lycanroc Midnight is a okay pick, because of the no guard ability. It can just stab stone edges into everything. I mean, okay, it can be hit by everything as well, but it's not as a bulky one. It's bulkier than their counterparts from day form and the dawn form, but I think it's fine. It has a good damage output in my opinion, a wide move pool to play with it. But what I didn't like here is they have the third ground type weakness here, which is kind of weird, and they have to play around, I think, a little bit. And the problem here is the Gravitas, for example, the G-Max move from Orbeetle just doesn't help here at all. And they picked in the free tier Ferrothorn. So they add a little bit more bulk, a lot of bulk. Added a Grass Steel typing. So 2 types they're lacking of. And I mean, it's neutral to ground type moves, so for the ground type weakness, this doesn't help. But you can stall out in the late game a little bit, and you can, I think it's the first time they can make use of the Trick Room. They have twice here, for example, they can use it twice here. So yeah, Ferrothorn, I think they can make use of it, kind of. But it's just, I think it's a stalling point for opposing G-Max situations, maybe. so for a leech seed, and you can set up with iron defense and body press and such things. And then they added in the free tier as well Snorlax. Snorlax overall is a good Pokemon in my opinion. I mean, the G-Max form, G-Max Snorlax is even better, but you can make use of Snorlax. I mean, you can use it with a band, you can blow up with self-destruct, you can just belly drum and make a lot of pressure to the opposing side because you can't ignore it. You can even play some things like Yawn in some things, Recycle, and so on and so forth. So they added a lot of bulk here. And they continued with that route because they added a Vaporeon as well, because they had no water type currently. And my thought process here was maybe they would just finish their Fire, Water, Grass core, but if you can see there is no fire type, besides they decide to go for Fire Savelli, which they can. But Vaporeon just adds a lot of bulk as well into the team. Same goes for the Avalok, which is another free pick, which is another Trick Room user, but it can make of the Trick Room if they set up. And Avalok can be a very big threat in Trick Room because it's very defensively bulky, and you can put Assault Vest on it, and it's even then on the special side very bulky. It has a good move pool to set up stats, and if you're able to trigger a weakness policy on it, which is maybe possible with the Gyro Ball, for example, here on their Ferrothorn. They have, I think, some more possibilities, but that's the obvious one in the Trick Room, in my opinion. The Avalok can do a good job. I mean, it can outstall a Glastrier matchup and can even win that if they're positioning it right. So overall, I like kind of the Mon synergy, I kind of like, and the mode synergy. But what I don't like here is they have a lot of Pokemon, in my opinion, which kind of needs a redirection to work better. For example, the Savelli just wanted to set up a Sword Stance, for example, or the little Snorlax want a redirection option to get the Belly Drum off, pretty surely, or even though the Trick Room. So I would have loved to see a Riolu, for example, as well here, because they can have the coaching option as well, which they don't have, I think. I don't know if the Lycanroc has coaching, but I don't think so. It doesn't. So, and maybe a Fungus or maybe a Tangela, just for example, maybe would have been a better option, because I think the Lycanroc is nice as a Pokemon, but I don't think it adds very much to the team. So if they would have gone for a Fungus, which is not the best Pokemon in the world, but it would work here in this team better, because the typings, I mean, they have a crazy ground type weakness, they have kind of a crazy fire type weakness as well. So it can be difficult to play around to their weaknesses, in my opinion. Because like I said, I like their modes, but for the G-Max Gravitas, I would have loved to see a hustle Pokemon here in that team, like a Durant or like a Dracozolt, or even though a Rufflet, because it can do a lot of damage, or let's say the pre-evolution of Hydreigon, the Swilus, something like that. I think that would have added a little bit more cherry on the cake to make the team even more pressuring and maybe more efficient, because I think, like I said, the modes in general and the Pokemon in general can make work, but I think it's kind of easy for an opponent to prep type-wise to their team and to stop their modes, because they're kind of obvious. What I think is threatening about this team is that they have a lot of bulk they can bring to the table. So they can outstall Dynamax, opposing Dynamax, in my opinion, very well, and can make use of it to the late game potentially. And because of the prankster Pokemon here with Morgram, I think this can do a lot of stuff. I mean, it can taunt the opposing side to not get taunted on their Trick Room user, for example, or to reverse the Trick Room and such things. Maybe that they can make work of that. So overall, I think I go to the scoreboard now, and then I let my mates here talk about the team a little bit, or to add just a little bit of information here. So type-wise, because I said they're lacking a lot of stuff, in my opinion, I would give it a 2 out of 4. Speed control-wise, so they have no Tailwind, right? So I have to give them some minus points on that. So yeah, speed control wise, they lack a Tailwind. I mean, I think Silvally had a Tailwind in the generation before, but it doesn't have it currently.
It was a tutor move.
Yeah, it was a tutor move, so it doesn't have it. So they have a lot of Trick Room here. I mean, they have the Prankster T-Wave, for example, to do some speed control, or Electro Web. That Tapu Koko can do some speed control stuff here as well, but I think overall they're lacking a little bit of speed control, because it's kind of focused on Trick Room. And if the opposing side is aware of that, they can, I think, really easily stop that. So speed control wise, I would give them a 2.5. Yeah, I think a 2.5. Mode wise, I think, like I said, because they are missing some redirection to make some modes work more efficiently, but I see a lot of cool things they can do, I would give them a 2. So I have to, reduce the, 2 out of 3. I think it's, for me personally, I think it's fine. General support. So this is a thing. Support, in my understanding, they have some Pokemon that can support the team, but overall I think the support is kind of lacking a lot of stuff. So they have to, focusing on, let's say 3 to 4 Pokemon. So I would say, for the support, I would give it a 1.5 out of 3 because of that. Offensively, this is the thing. Tapu Koko can do a lot of damage because of terrain. The Electrify can do a lot of damage. The Gengar as well. But then and maybe a Lycanroc, but overall they're lacking because they have to set up a lot of stuff to make a good damage output. So I would say offensively, it's not that threatening instantly, and I would give it as well a 1.5 out of 3. Bulk wise, I think they have a lot of bulk in this team, and they can set up even to get even more bulk here. So I would give it 3 out of 3 in total, because I think you have to break through this wall firstly. So I come to an endpoint of 12.5 and a grade of 6.25 for the Venomous Naganadels. So, and I will give the word to you guys. Maybe Kev would want to continue with that.
If he wants to, I can do it as well.
Chulainn,
I don't mind.
Yeah, it would be great if you could, because I actually set something up at the moment.
Okay, so I will just quickly go through the scoreboard. Like typing wise, he misses fighting type. He misses wait a minute, I have 2 things open. Yeah, it's his chart. So he misses fire, fighting, ground, dragon, and the flying type. It's not too bad, but especially like ground, like all of these typing are super important. You would say he's only missing 5 typings, but like it's not like he missed Spark or Rock typing. He's missing Fire, which is part of one of the most important cores. He misses Dragon, which isn't too much necessary. I mean, I don't have Dragon as well, but it's a nice typing to have. Fighting is really good offensively. Ground and Flying, super important, especially for the max move. Like, you want to have a max Quake and a max Airstream use on the team, which gets the step benefit from it. So I absolutely don't like that, and so I will just give a 1 on the typing. Speed control wise, I am at a 2. Like, yes, they have 2 Trick Room users, but like Gengar is not really a good Trick Room user. He can go for cheeky Trick Room stuff, but at first he's not bulky, and secondly he's super fast. So like, it's not like Trick Room is not the room where Gengar wants to shine. Same goes for Orbital. Like, it's not too slow, but at the same time it's not too fast, and I don't know what you really want to Trick Room with your G-Max Orbital. I think then you could just pick normal Orbital or something better as a Trick Room user, so that doesn't count too much for me. And other than that, yeah, there's no Tailwind, and yeah, they have like Electrip Coco, Icy Wind Gengar, Icy Wind Silvally, but that's really it, and it's not like they have good Pokemon to benefit from that. Like, Gengar and Coco are the Pokemon that set up the Icy Wind, but they are the only real Pokemon besides Electivire that really benefit from it. Like, maybe Lightning Rock, but it's a tier 4 Pokemon, it's not too scary at all. Mods wise, I gave it a 1.5. That's only because of the Morgrem. Like, Morgrem makes Gengar Coco way more scary with the fake tier stuff. Other than that, there really isn't too much. Like, yeah, you can go for Max Shadow Gengar and go for Explosion with Snorlax and Silvally. Yeah, that's cool, but that's really reliant on the surprise factor, and if your opponent just protects, you're completely screwed. And the Trick Room mode, yeah, I mean, none of the Trick Room setters besides, like, technically Choice Band, Snorlax, or like some cheeky Everlock stuff deal massive damage without setup. Like, Ferrophone isn't too much of an offensive threat. It's more like this dolly machine with body press stuff, so you quickly will lose your Trick Room turns if you decide to go for the Trick Room road. General support wise, like, Gengar is cool, Morgrem is cool, but that's really the support. I guess Orbital can do supportive stuff, same as Silvally, but it's not like they have like super good supporter besides Morgrem. So I will only give it a 1.5. Offense wise, as I said in the modes wise, like, Gengar Coco really strong, and that's really it with the offensive stuff. Other than some cheeky strats, there's nothing to really blow up your opponent, and they don't have a really good Dynamax Pokemon. I mean, Coco and Gengar are quite decent, but like, usually you want a Dynamax Pokemon that can at least take 1 or 2 hits, and both of them really can't, and they are weak to the same stuff in ground. Like, Gengar doesn't even have Levitate anymore, and the only really bulky Dynamaxers are Snorlax and Everlock, but as I said, they don't deal too much damage on their own without setup. And bulk-wise, I give it only a 1.5 because of the poor typing. And if you look at the monsters that are a little bit more bulky, like Ferrophone, Snorlax, Everlock, all of them are weak to fighting, and 2 of them are also weak to fire, and none of them can deal with steel types. So your bulky monsters are weak to the same Pokemon, and therefore, like, you can't go for a Stally game because they can't switch into each other. And Vaporeon, yeah, Vaporeon technically makes up for the fire type weakness and somehow covers the weather weak special defense of Everlock, but like, Vaporeon, it can keep them healthy and stuff like that, but like, I think they would be better water types for that job. Vaporeon, it's decent for stalling, but it's not good enough, and it's not like 1.5 is super bad. It's half of the points possible, but I can't go any higher. And this is total with 9 points, 4.5 grade, which is for me so far the worst team. I just compared them with Angel City, and at first it was like we were like, Angel City would be probably the worst, but they at least have a solid mode, like the reliable Metagross rain mode stuff, and that's really solid. But this team doesn't have a really solid mode that they can bring to pretty much every week. And yeah, that's all I have to say about the team.
All right, then I'll pick the ball up right there and also just go over my chart and give you the points that I came up with. Typing-wise, I definitely agree with what has just been said. There's a lot of important typings missing, and there's overall already enough gaps, if you want to say it like that. And as Chulainn pointed out, these are quite important ones. So I think typing-wise, a 1 is fair here, especially because I gave similar points to other teams with similar weaknesses. And I also, think that because especially ground and flying types are missing here, and also the fire type, it's just something that you usually would want to kind of mitigate in your team and want to have there. And if this is missing, that's kind of the backbone of your team that you don't have in it. So I don't feel confident going higher than a 1 here. In terms of speed control, I think this team is kind of in an awkward spot because it kind of has speed control, but at the same time it doesn't really do anything with that speed control. So I was a bit torn between what I should rate here, but I came up with a 2 because I think against some teams it can work, but that's totally dependent on the matchup. Like the Icy Wind that you can spam with, for example, Silvelli, can be extremely crucial and can get you in a nice spot and get you the upper hand so that you're faster in the next turns. But for most matchups, it probably won't do too much because we have so many tailwinds in the division, and there's so many other, like also trick rooms and so on, that can reverse that, and then the tailwind doesn't even do anything for you. No, not the tailwind. The Icy Wind doesn't even do anything for you. It even works against you then. And as has been said, this team doesn't really benefit from setting up its own trick room, except for maybe the Avalok, and the Ferrothorn. But there's not. You can also. Oh, I overlooked the Snorlax. Actually, you can of course also play the Snorlax under Trick Room, but I don't think that mode is too strong actually, especially because the general support is kind of lackluster in this team. So for speed control, I gave it only a 2 out of 4. In terms of modes, I gave it a 2 because I kind of like what's present. I'm not sure if it actually makes sense, but I think you can do some funny things with this team. And I'm looking forward to see some shenanigans of the Venomous Naganadels. But at the same time, it's also not like a super clear and strong mode. I think it's rather a fun team. And in my opinion, it would be stronger if you made more out of your Gigantamaxmon, played more with the gravity effect and so on and so forth. But that might also just be personal preference. What I do like in terms of support is the potential to have 2 Frisks, which is always really handy in draft leagues. But at the same time, this is also kind of where it stops. The Morgram does get some nice support moves, but that's kind of it. So for me, support is a 1 out of 3. Offense, I think the team looks okay in terms of offense. It can deal damage. Not super reliably, so I was kind of between a 1 and a 2, but I wanted to stick with the 2. I think it's more a 2 than a 1. And for bulk, I actually wrote down a 3 at first, but Chulainn just convinced me with what he said. And I really think that usually this team has some great bulky opportunities, but given that all the bulk is also weak to the same or same-ish types, this kind of mitigates the usually strong bulky core that's present in the team. And more than a 2 simply is not on the table. So a 2 out of 3 it is in terms of bulk, which leads me to a total of 10 points or a grade of 5.
Okay, great. Before I go to the Albuquerque Appletun, there's just one more thing I want to add. I was thinking what would benefit from G-Max Orbital, and I thought, yeah, okay, Hypnosis from Gengar would work, but obviously we have Coco on the team, so that's another anti-synergy, which might could be changed in the future. But now we have to talk a lot about the team. I will swap to the Albuquerque Appletun.
I just want to add something. Just last one thing in defense of the Silvally, because you added the lacking typings, but maybe you don't like it, but I think we have to mention that Silvally can have every typing. So depending on the
Yes.
matchup, they can just maybe change that a little bit up and to improve their matchup.
Yes, that's a fair point. Silvally also is one of the parts in the team that I really, really like, because in draft leagues, having the RKS system ability is really ugly. Like, preparing against this is no fun.
Okay, great. So the Albuquerque Appletuns with Coach Clint. He was the guy that took the team after round 3 with like Rillaboom, Zapdos, and Registeel already picked, and he swapped Registeel to Comfy and then continued to draft. I will talk about the Pokemon real quick individually. Like G-Max Rillaboom, obviously one of the best G-Max mons, with a very strong 160 base attack, base move and Gigantamax. He brings the terrain to the table, Fake Out, like Grassy Glide Priority, great bulk, great typing. He can U-turn, he can knock off. He has so many good tools. He can even go for taunt. Like obviously one of the strongest Gigantamax mons. And I don't think I have to talk too much about it. Like everyone knows how good G-Max Rillaboom is. Same goes for Zapdos. Like Zapdos has a really good typing. Like Electric and Flying is, in my opinion, one of the best typings in the game. Electric only being weak to ground and Flying giving immunity to it, so you only get the benefits from the electric typing. And like with the electric typing, there comes a lot of cool resistances, like electric, which makes you immune to, like makes your flying type like neutral to electric, which is pretty solid. Like it doesn't have too many resistances in total, but you at the same time you don't have too many weaknesses. And with the great bulk of Zapdos and Roosting, which then even grants you the recovery from Grassy Terrain, Zapdos definitely can stall out some games, but it also can go super offensive with a Life Orb and super fast. It has great stats overall, great move pool in Electric, Flying, and Fire as its main attacking types, which covers for pretty much every type. Like nothing can really switch into a combination of Electric, Flying, and Fire, so I really like the Zapdos. Comfy I really like as well. Like Comfy benefits from the G-Max Rillaboom from the Grassy Terrain, improving its healing capabilities. Obviously it gets priority on every healing move, so the Flora Healing from it, which heals normally 50%, in Grassy Terrain it heals, I believe, 75%? Or 2/3. I think it's 75%. I'm not 100% sure on that. Obviously it's a lot, especially with +3 priority. So this is a really solid core. Also, this gives you a nice trick room option with Fake Out from Rillaboom and Comfy setting up the trick room, which is very, very reliable. And then we have the Articuno Gala. Like normally I really like Articuno Gala, especially for a tier 2 pick, because it gives you, like, it protects you from Intimidate and stuff like that with the competitive ability. However, in some matchups the ability is like kinda useless. That's the downside in Draft League, because not everyone has an Intimidate mon, but obviously it's a really good ability. And it's one of the few Pokemon that gets Tailwind and Trick Room and Imprison, so it's really all about setting up the speed control in your favor with Tailwinding or even Trick Rooming, giving it an Iron Ball, for example, makes it really slow, then also benefits from the Grassy Terrain as well, and so on and so on. Being able to prevent your opponent from Trick Rooming. So I really like that. However, I don't like having like Zapdos and Articuno Galar. I think that's a little bit, I don't know, already having 2 flying types, I don't like that too much. from a defensive standing point. Like you with these 3 picks alone, you have 4 ice weaknesses and no resistance, and also 2 rock weaknesses, which I don't like too much. Then we have the Obstagoon. Obstagoon I really like. It's a shame that it has a 4 times fighting weakness. I think it would be a lot better with only dark or only normal typing. However, it has 3 amazing abilities, and Reckless, Guts, and Defiant, all of them can do massive work depending on the matchup. It has like the steps are decent. Like normal, it's nearly everything neutral, and everything that normal doesn't gets hit by dark. It also has fighting coverage. I think it has Gunk Shot for fairy types, and his Parting Shot. It can act as a really good support. I really like that for a tier 3 pick. And having Parting Shot on the team is definitely really good. Also, you have double protection from Intimidate. Then we have Lapras. Obviously, like Gigantamax Lapras would be way better with Comfy. However, I think normal Lapras can also do some work. It's not the best Pokemon, but I have brought it to Regional before Gigantamax Lapras got revealed, and it was really good. Especially with such a bulky team, you can definitely go for endgames where you can, for example, Perish. You can go for Ice Shot for the birds or for Rillaboom. So I honestly really like Zapdos, and not Zapdos, Lapras. It gives you an Ice switch in 4 times Ice resistance, has good abilities, good pick. Then we have Diden, and Diden I honestly don't get because you already have Electric typing and Fairy typing. However, Diden is really good mon, like really good speed, decent abilities, kind of niche abilities. Unfortunately, it doesn't really have the bulk to make use out of Chick Pouch. However, I think in some matchups you could run it weather bulky and do something with it. So overall, I think Diden can do something, but it's not really good on the team in my opinion. Speaking of good picks, Sableye, really, like, obviously one of the best Pokemon in the game for supportive and every stupid shenanigans in the game. Like, it has Prankster, it has its signature move Quash. I know Persian Alola gets it as well, but for me Quash is Sableye's signature move because it also gets priority on it. Like, Quash basically says, regardless of how fast you are, you go last, which is obviously one of the best and one of the strongest speed controls, because even in Trick Room, your Regieleki will go before Torkoal if it gets crushed. That's amazing and can absolutely destroy some strategies, but it doesn't stop there. Like, you can go for cheeky trick eject button stuff, you can go for Will-O-Wisp, it has Fake Out, it has not every move in the game, but it has Weather Control, Taunt, it has decent options. You can also go for Weather and like Weather Ball on Zapdos for some cheeky strategies. I really like that. Hitmonlee, the first Pokemon that really benefits from the Grassy Terrain based on its ability, with the Unburden ability, really good. Being able to run your Hitmonlee super bulky and offensively, or just super bulky and being a coaching support for the Rillaboom, I definitely can see this doing great work. And yeah, also you can go for Choice Scarf, Reckless stuff, really strong pick, fighting type was needed. And overall, I think Hitmonlee is one of the better fighting types in Tier 2, and it also has, it's even Tier 3, and it also has like Fake Out. It's a really good one. Mawile, I don't like Mawile. Like, yes, it gets Intimidate for you, but that's really it. Like, Mawile doesn't do anything on the board. It's just sitting there doing no damage. Like, in singles you can at least set up Stealth Rocks, but it doesn't do much in doubles. And other than that, like, Mawile, maybe you can pull off some cheeky strategies with it, but sorry, but it's a little bit late, so sorry for the German word, but overall, I don't like Mawile at all. Like, it's a third fairy type, it's not a good steel type. I don't get why you would pick Mawile. And then you also pick Klinklang. Like, why would you pick Mawile if you plan on picking Klinklang? Obviously, I like Klinklang, especially with Diden. Like, the plus-minus synergy is really good. Like, Diden can do massive damage with it, but Klinklang on its own is not a good Pokemon. Like, it can set up Trick Room, it has Clear Body, so you can maybe go for Baldos, proccing the weakness policy stuff, but it has such a lackluster move pool. Its only coverage is Steel, Normal, and Electric, and that's really it. But I mean, for a Tier 3 pick, it's maybe decent, and honestly, there weren't too many good Steel types left, However, I don't like the mobile pick if you pick Xing. Looking at the type chart, this team lacks a lot of typings, like no fire type, no ground types, no dragon types. These are the big ones. Poison, rock, and bug is okay. Like these types are kind of good to have, but they are not super necessary. However, like if you miss important types like fire and ground, which I just mentioned are super important, and dragon, I honestly can only give you, I guess I can give you 1.5 because it's better than the Venomous Naganadels. So yeah, I will go up to 1.5, but I can't go higher. Speed control wise, like you have fast airstream from Zapdos, you have Tailwind, Trick Room, and Imprison on Articuno. You have Lapras with Icy Wind. Obviously Sableye is super good speed control. Hitmonlee is super fast, can also go for max airstreams. You have Tiden for another stuff. You have Comfy for Trick Room. You have a lot of options. However, like I don't know, Articuno does both jobs as on its own, but I figured that Articuno sometimes like doesn't really like sometimes wants to fulfill another role and can't really provide the speed control on its own, and also sometimes it just gets threatened before it can do anything. And if your Articuno gets knocked up before you get up a Tailwind, your team can get like overrolled really quick. But everything else is kind of decent on the speed control. So I would say you have good options, but you miss something like a really fast Icy Wind or something like that. So I say it's a 3 for me. Modes wise, I honestly like. I think you could have done way better because your main modes is something like Zapdos and stuff like that, but Zapdos would like Fake Tears next to it. Sableye unfortunately doesn't get Fake Tears, it gets Helping Hand, it's quite cool, but I think with Fake Tears Zapdos just needs this extra little bit of damage more that it sometimes needs. Like Zapdos honestly misses a lot of KOs sometimes on Dynamax Mons, where Fake Tears would really help. Also, I think Comfy doesn't have a really good partner for its strictness policy. Like, yes, you can proc the policy on Hitmonlee with Burden, but Hitmonlee is not the scariest Dynamax one in the world. It's decent, but it's not like you can't really heal your Hitmonlee up over and over again. What Comfy really likes. Lapras is decent, but obviously the normal Lapras is not nearly as good for that job as the Gigantamax form, and everything else is not good for it. I would have really loved to see a Goodra pick, because Goodra really benefits from the grassy terrain healing, and Comfy is an amazing partner for it. You can proc the policy on Goodra, you can even go for Giga Drain on it with Zap Zipper and a physical Goodra. I think Goodra would have been really, really good on this team. And the Trick Room mode is like you have good Trick Room setups, but you don't have good Trick Room mons. Mobile is your best Trick Room mon, and Mobile is not a good mon. Everything else is like the nearest lowest thing is Sableye, which is also not in Trick Room sweeper, and then Lapras. But normal Lapras is not a huge threat, and that's not super slow, so you don't really get much out of your Trick Room mode. I think you should definitely work on that. General support, like you have Comfy, you have Sableye, and you have Articuno, which can support. I think that's clearly a 2 at least. There are some things missing, like for example, better Intimidator. Intimidator is fine, but I think Mobile most times is just a dead slot. You have 2 Fake Outers, that's really cool, but like as I said, you have some support, but you don't have the best mons to make use of out of the support. So yeah, I think that's a 2 for me overall. Offensive wise, as I said, Zapdos is really your best mon, and you can't really support it as much as it really wants to, and everything else is kind of decent in terms of damage, but not super threatening. Like you can definitely outstall a Gigantamax Rillaboom, you can definitely outbulk Lapras, you can definitely outbulk an Obstagoon. Like they don't threaten super much Okos, and they also don't really steamroll your team. So I think 1.5 is fine for it. And bulk wise, like you have the longevity from the terrain and from Comfy, but none of your Pokemon besides Zapdos and maybe Labras are super bulky to make use out of that. Like, for example, if you had Goodra, you had a really good Sponge. It would switch into so many typings super well, and also good Fire type would be really good to have another Ice type switching besides Lapras. I mean, the Steel types are decent, but as said, they are not good Pokemon on their own. So I think just a little bit more bulk to make use of the Comfy would be really good, and a good screen setter as well to make really big use out of the Comfies and the aggressive terrain healing. But as it's right now, I can only give it a 1.5, which is in total 11 points with a grade for 5.5 for the Albuquerque Appletuns. Yeah, you can continue.
Kev, would you want to start or should I?
Yeah, I will. I just thought you were gonna start because you started speaking. But let me pick up the scoreboard and see what I got for the Albuquerque Appletuns. Yeah, typing-wise, I think this team isn't as strong. Yeah, some important things are missing. There's no fire, there's no ground type. Also kind of missing the dragon type here. And we also see a lot of duplicates in typings, especially like I think there's 3 fairies or 4. No, I think it's 3. You've got 2 steel types, 2 dark types, stuff like that. So this is why I end up with a 1 out of 4 in terms of typing. I really don't like the duplicates, and I really don't like that this also results in missing a lot of important types. Speed control wise, I actually kind of like the team. I think you can do a lot with the team present. You can go for Tailwinds, you can go for Trick Rooms. The Sableye is just, as Chulainn explained, incredible for speed control. Quash is a disgusting move, and I bet everybody has lost to a Quash already, and just to a Quash. So if you don't get Sableye off the field, you can be in a bad position really quickly. And I think this is one of the best support Pokemon that you can pick up in the league, actually. And pairing this with another good support mon like Comfy, I also really like. So yeah, speed control and support-wise, I'm kind of a fan of this team. So I gave it a 4 out of 4 in terms of speed control. And in terms of support, I gave it a 2 out of 3. Few small things are missing, I think. I mean, there's... For every kind of support that you would need on your team, I think there's at least an attempt to bring that in, like the Intimidate with Morwale and so on, but it kind of feels like it's always the worst option than compared to what you could have gotten. So, I don't want to give the full 3 points, but yeah, still, Sableye and Comfy, in my opinion, great Pokemon in terms of support. Then in terms of modes, yeah, there's a few things that you can play, and because of the initially picked strong core with Rilla and Zapdos, I really like that, and I think you can do a lot with the team. You can go sneaky with the Lapras and, for example, a weakness policy or something different, and your opponent won't actually really know until you reveal the policy or you don't. So that I really like, although, of course, normal Lapras, way worse than the Gmax version, but it still has its potential and it still can be super tricky for some matchups. For example, the Colossal doesn't like it as much, so yeah, it's definitely something you have to consider and keep in mind that it is in the team, and I think it adds some nice variety here. I do agree that the Goodra is definitely missing and would be an awesome pickup. Maybe if this can be done as a trade during the league, the team gets much more strong. But for now, I think it's a something between a 1 and a 2 in terms of modes. And I'll actually round it up here and stick with the 2. In terms of offense and bulk, I only wrote down a 1 because I think there's not too much potential. Like, you can do some things if you get the setups right, and you do have a lot of weaknesses. There's a lot of duplicate typings and so on, and this kind of makes both your offense and your defense lackluster, and you're missing, especially for offensive typings, you're missing some important hard hitters here. For example, as a steel type, if your opponent brings Clefairy or whatever, then you're basically screwed with this team, I think, because you can't hit it as hard. Clang Clang can maybe do some things here, but I think a harder hitting steel type would have been better. And the same basically goes for the bulk, because you have so many duplicate typings here and missing other important ones. You kind of expose your weaknesses easier, and also the individual Pokemon in the team aren't super bulky. So, for example, with the Venomous Naganadels, I think the individual Pokemon were still much bulkier than what we see here. So I just gave that one a 2 in terms of bulk. So I can't give this one a 2 as well. Which means the Albuquerque Appletuns get a 1 in bulk and a 1 in offense, bringing me to a total of 11 points, or a grade of 5.5.
Okay, so I will just add quickly my points here. I think you said everything type-wise. What I just want to have to add is, like Kev said, there are a lot of duplicate typings, and what I as well don't like is that there are modes like Rillaboom and Hitmonlee, which were a good combination on the paper, but if you have a good flying type, just swept through this team, to this combination. So their modes are lacking of counter typings, in my opinion. So I would give it a 1.5. Speed control wise, you told everything. I give it a 3 out of 4, just because I think they have a lot of speed control here going, but can't make very good use of it in general, because especially with the Trick Room, they have no Trick Room mode at all, and things like Zapdos and Articuno and Rillaboom are not the fastest Pokemon in the world, and even though Hitmonlee without Unburden, it's not that fast, so they are lacking, have a crazy speed gap in the low and in the high, in my opinion. So I give it a 3 out of 4. Mode-wise, I give it a 2.5 out of 3, because I think they have a lot of modes here, but because they lacking a Trick Room mode, in my opinion, this is a minus on my side. General support is there. They have a lot of Pokemon that can support the team, which I kind of saw here is that the Lapras is kind of the omnipresent weakness policy procer, because it can weakness policy proc the Rillaboom, the Zapdos, the Articuno, and the Comfy just for the Lapras, the Obstagoon, and the Hitmonlee. Or maybe the Sableye, if you want to go to Dynamax Sableye with the weakness policy. Why not?
If he's gonna pull that off, that would be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, why not? But I think overall the support is obviously there. Offensively, I think the lack of offense. I mean, I think Hitmonlee can hit like a truck. Rillaboom as well. Zapdos, yeah, needs some support to get the KOs. Sometimes a helping hand is enough, sometimes not. And every other Pokemon needs a setup in that regard. Bulk-wise, I give it a 1.5 out of 3, because Rillaboom, I think, is bulky, Zapdos as well. Articuno and Lapras, yeah, of course, and they have the regeneration stuff here ongoing, but every other Pokemon is kind of frail. Even though the Obstagoon can be bulky, the 4-type weakness of fighting is it kind of negotiated a little bit, and the Fairy type weakness as well, because nearly every team has a good Fairy type, and Obstagoon can't deal so much damage to Fairy types, even though it has Gunk Shot. So I come to the total points of 13 and a grade of 6.5 from my side for the Albuquerque Appletuns.
All right. thanks for the judgment, and then let's get to the Hals Haxorus, coached by the Bacon Boy, the Hals Haxorus. They initially picked G-Max Anaconda, I think. Not sure if it was their first pick, but they picked G-Max.
I think
it was, right? Yeah. Okay, then I remember that correctly. Then I remember that correctly. So they went with the G-Max Anaconda, which is quite a nice Gigantamax Pokemon for Tier 3, I think. It has a nice trapping ability, so you can set that up and hinder your opponent from switching out for, I think, up to 5 turns, which is kind of amazing. What I didn't really like is that the G-Max Anaconda, which is a ground type, gets paired with a Garchomp, which also is another ground type. So that was kind of a bit of a weird pickup. I don't necessarily think the Garchomp is bad, but I think another Gigantamaxmon would have been useful here, especially because if they picked it in the first or second round or something like that, then there were plenty of different Gigantamaxmons still available to build around that, and I'm quite sure that plan of picking Garchomp, Gyarados, and Rotom was present for quite some time and not something that coincidentally happened. But that's also a mode in this team that I actually really like. Rotom, Gyarados, and Garchomp cover each other's weaknesses quite well. Usually you've got the 4 times weakness with Electric for the Gyarados, but you can switch in Rotom if you want to, because it kind of resists that. But you can also switch in the Garchomp. As it's a ground type, it won't take any damage, so that's nice synergy in my opinion. And you also get to cover each other's weaknesses quite well, because if there's, for example, a Raichu on the field trying to hit your Gyarados, then you can just bring in the Garchomp and instantly threaten that out, which is something I think is really cool with this team. But let's stick to order here and stay with the G-Max Anaconda. It has the Sand Spit ability, which makes it kind of one of the best sand setters next to like actual sand setters, of course. But you can get it up pretty reliably, and if your opponent doesn't want to trigger it, you can still trigger it on your own. So that's absolutely fine, I think. And the sand actually synergizes quite well with some other mons in the team that we will get to later. So other than that, I don't know actually if there's so many noteworthy attacks. I think it has an okay move pool. You can do some variation, but it's not the greatest in my opinion. Rotom, on the other hand, is an amazing pickup. Rotom is a super versatile Pokemon, especially in Series 7. I think it gained in usage again a lot. And it just goes to show how strong this Pokemon is. And especially in draft leagues, I think, where you have way less threats for the Rotom, it gets much stronger. And you can just do a lot of things with Rotom. As I think I said in one of the earlier episodes, the only part that I dislike about Rotom variations is that the only stab you get with them is always kind of... it's a strong move, like Overheat, but it also lowers your special attack. So that's not too great. I personally am not the biggest fan of that, but I also know that it's quite strong, and you can do a lot of different things with Rotom. You can set it up with Nasty Plot, play for a lot of bulk, and then get your offense over the Nasty Plot setups, or you can just be annoying with ally switches. You can spam Will-O-Wisps out and annoy your opponent, triple their physical attackers, and so on and so forth. So there's, in my opinion, also always a great versatility in having a Rotom on your team, especially Rotom Heat synergizes well with what they got in the rest of the team. Then there's the Umbreon, and Umbreon is incredibly bulky. I think it has so both defense and special defense are over 100, which is insane. And it also has quite the high base HP. It gets annoying moves like Yawn and You can't even fake it out because it gets the inner focus ability. You can copycat stuff if you want to, but I actually don't think there's too much potential for copycat with this team, but in particular. Regardless, you could still bring in something that is really reliant on that. You've got support moves like Fake Tears. You can bring in Weather Ball and kind of play around with the weather to adjust to your opponent's team. You've got the Substitute, which can always be annoying and hard to break through, especially with a Pokemon like Umbreon. And that's just something that makes this a defensive powerhouse, in my opinion. So that is definitely a great pickup. Next up, we've got Sylveon, which I think in this context then gets a bit weird. Maybe that's also just me, but I don't know. I don't like having two evolutions on the same team. I know they've kind of filled different gaps, and Sylveon also is offensive while still being specially bulky. But because Umbreon is already that specially bulky, I think you could have picked up something better for your team in the tier 2 instead of quote-unquote wasting both picks for an evolution here. And the thing with Sylveon also is that most of the time you probably want to bring the Pixelate ability and also the Pixie Plate, I guess, to get the most out of your Sylveon in terms of offense. You could, of course, variate a bit there and bring different items. Get a Trick Room up and bring an Iron Ball or a Room Service or stuff like that to make it a bit slower and trick your opponent. But still, I think overall it feels a bit weird. I do like that it brings spread damage into the fray in this team, so that's not too bad. I mean, you also, that's what I wanted to say. Nothing also. And it also gets some nice support abilities. I personally am a big fan of moves like Charm and potentially even something like Attract Shenanigans if you want to go that route. It can be quite fun. Attract, of course, less useful, but Charm definitely super nice to just cripple your opponent, stall out some turns, and then hit back once you are able to position yourself in the right spot and get a better pivoting in the match. And of course, you also get the double yawn pressure with Sylveon and Umbreon, which isn't too bad considering that you can trap your opponent and kind of force them to go asleep, thanks to the G-Max Sandaconda. Next in the list is the Decidueye. The Decidueye, I think, is quite a nice Pokemon. It's a bit niche or a bit underrated, I think, but it can be super strong with the right partners. The long reach ability, I think, has its potentials. There's not too many opposing Pokemon where it makes sense to have that, but it's always nice to have that option. And the typing of Grass and Ghost, in my opinion, is quite nice. So you get some good resistances here, and just stuff like completely avoiding damage on normal and fighting type is something this team, I think, can use quite well. The thing that I don't like too much about the Decidueye is that it brings another ice type weakness into the team. And given that there's Sandaconda and Garchomp, it already has a lot of ice type weaknesses. So that's something that I would like to question a bit. But aside from that, I think it's quite cool. It gets Sucker Punch, so you can always go first. It gets Shadow Sneak and could potentially set up a weakness policy for someone. Unfortunately, there's not really a weakness policy user on this team that likes the Shadow Sneak, but who knows, maybe you can trade that in. It also gets U-turn in terms you want to position yourself. If you want to go down that route, you can even play some weather control. I think it gets Sunny Day and maybe even Rain Dance, but I think it was only Sunny Day, which is great because having weather control on mons that don't usually do it can be a nice surprise in a draft league. From my experience at least. And you also get Swords Dance and can set up the Decidueye. The only thing that you would, in my opinion, need a bit more in this team is something to actually allow other mons to get the setup through, because you don't really have that. And you have a lot of mons that rely on or would like to set up with moves like Sword Stance, which we will see later. Next, we've got Stoutland. Stoutland is a Pokemon that synergizes quite well with Sandaconda, because you get the Sand Rush ability, and this actually makes it quite fast then, as it doubles the speed in Sandstorm, of course. And this is also something that the team, I think, can use quite well, because overall it only has a kind of mediocre speed tiering, I would say. Most of the mons are between 60 and 90 base speed, or I think even lower, and there's only one above 100. So having the option to go a bit faster with Sandrush Stoutland is a really nice way to bring that in, because maybe you didn't get to pick Tailwind users that suited your team or whatever. Stoutland itself can also be quite offensive, gets 110 base attack, which isn't too shabby. It also gets some nice coverage moves, because it's a normal type, and normal types always get ridiculous access to all the moves. Luckily, it's not a Gen 1 normal type, because then it would know nearly every move in the game, or at least it feels like that. But I think you can have some nice variations from week to week with the Stoutland. I actually really like the next pick, which is the Tier 4 Girder, and this is the super cheap budget Conkeldurr, which for some reason lurks around in Tier 1, and Girder lurks around in Tier 4, which is amazing, because Girder doesn't have that much worse stats, and you can slap an Eviolite on it, then it becomes quite bulky again. It gets nearly the same move pool, so you can also play Mach Punch, you can play Drain Punch and all the good stuff with Girder, and it also gets the same ability, of course, like Guts and Sheer Force and Iron Fist. So this is, in my opinion, really just an extremely cheap way to get Conkeldurr into your team. And I think it also works quite well because it's super slow, and you can potentially play it in Trick Room if you want to. Then we've got the aforementioned Gyarados. Gyarados, the second Intimidate user. I forgot to mention that with Stoutland. So really nice opportunity to either play double Intimidate if you're facing a really physically offensive opponent, or get the Moxie in and just steamroll your opponent with Gyarados, because you Dynamax it and then you get the ball rolling. Yeah, Gyarados, of course, everybody knows it, likes to set up with things like Dragon Dance and so on, and then just go absolutely nuts. Has a 4x electric weakness, but that one is covered quite well in terms of type synergy. This team has got the Gyarados with its 2 ground types, so that's nice. Gyarados is happy. Then we got Garchomp, and Garchomp is the second mon that works incredibly well with the Sand mode. I think it would have been better to pick up another Sand Setter, though, just so you do not double the ground typing. Maybe Gigalith or Tyranitar or someone like that would have been better and fit the team nicer. However, you get the Sand Veil ability, and raising your evasion stat during Sandstorm, I think that's quite nasty and can become a real issue if your opponent gets unlucky, or vice versa. If you get quite lucky, this can easily turn the game into your favor and have your Garchomp go crazy like nothing else. Of course, you also get the nice electric type resistance in trade for the 4x ice weakness, which I already mentioned. But you also cover for rock, and I think there's been 1 or 2 typings already that can also use that rock type coverage. And Garchomp itself, I think, is also a familiar face, so we don't necessarily need to say too much about it. Just worth mentioning here again, a Pokemon that likes to set up with Sword Stance, but can't really because there's no one to protect it. Like, there's no follow me or other redirection in that sense. And then we've got Blastoise. Blastoise, I think, mainly is in this team to get in the Aqua Jet and trigger a weakness policy. But I'm not I'm not really sure what it does here, because it feels a bit lost. Like, it's another Pokemon that really, really wants to have protection on its side, to get a Shell Smash up, or to do some nice work in Dynamax. And since you can't even Gigantamax it, you do not get the benefit of the Gigantamax, of the Gmax Cannonade. So I don't really like the pickup, especially because there already has been a water type on the team, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the Gyarados has been picked before. So picking another tier 2 and choosing Blastoise feels kinda iffy for me. It gets another Yawn, it brings in Fake Out to the team, but honestly I think you could have done a way better pick that fills other gaps in your team, especially because you also do have some typings that are missing, like Psychic and Steel, or maybe Ice to cover for your own Ice type weakness. Something that just fills that gap better. There's would have been a ton of variety in tier 2 that, in my opinion, would have been a better fit than Blastoise. And lastly, we've got Haunter. Haunter, I think, is there to set the Trick Room, but at the same time, this team doesn't have a nice dedicated Trick Room mode. So maybe it's more about the kind of support capabilities this brings to the fray. Hitting your opponent with a sneaky self-destruct, or trick rooming, reverse trick rooming, or whatever, Will-O-Wisp, weather control kind of. You do get Icy Wind, which isn't too bad because it's also one of the faster mons in this team, and almost 100 base speed. So I think that could work to get the team some speed control in, but yeah, not too sure. Getting to the scoring, I think in terms of typings, this team gets a 2 out of 4 from me. It covers a lot, but it also leaves some gaps. I think it doesn't get an Ice type, it doesn't get a Bug Rock type, and no Steel type. Some of the types missing here aren't too important. Psychic also missing, but some, like Steel and Psychic, especially in my opinion, kinda lackluster not to have on this team. Would be great additions and opportunities to also, maybe just proc a weakness policy on a strong Psychic type and then get rolling from there. And you also have some duplicates that I don't like too much, like doubling Water, Ground, and Ghost. Feels a bit lackluster. I think trading that over time definitely makes the team much stronger. Then in terms of speed control, this team is super weird in my opinion, because it's not that fast. As I said, it kind of tingles between 60 and 80 base speed. It does have Sense Bit, so it gets some form of passive speed control, but not really. And you're also not the most sand abusive team, I would say. So you only have one Sand Rush user that can really benefit from that, and that's Stoutland, which is not the best Sand Rush user to, put it mildly. You also don't have Tailwind, if I'm not mistaken, which means you cannot set that up and be faster. And for Trick...
The Sidgewai has Tailwind.
The Sidgewai gets Tailwind, actually, okay.
Yeah, I just checked it before, because I also thought they would have no Tailwind.
Okay, but yeah, then even if the Sidgewai gets Tailwind, it's like 70 base speed, so I imagine it's gonna have a hard time setting that up. And maybe you even need to sacrifice your Focus Sash just so you're not overrun by a Dark or a Fire type, or maybe even the Ice type, which is so crucial for this team. And then you get up the Tailwind, but yeah, your opponent probably also does, so what do you even do with your Tailwind? And then for Trick Room, they've got the Haunter, but they don't really have something to play in the Trick Room. Gerda is the only actually slow Pokemon, and there's of course slower Pokemons in the division than Gerda, so I don't really like it. Speed control wise, I kind of tend between a 1 and a 2, and I think I even want to give it a 1 actually. Next up, we've got the modes. The modes I think are fine. I like some stuff that you got here, like Sandaconda, Sandspit, getting the Sand mode in, or the soft Sand mode. As I said, I think it could be a stronger Sand here, especially because the G-Max Sandaconda would be suited quite well for that. I do like the trapping capabilities this team has, and I can imagine that playing against Sandaconda and being trapped with double Yawn is extremely annoying. You also got Gyarados, Garchomp, and Rotom, which can cover each other super well, and they are 3 really threatening Pokemon. So this is quite the strong core, and I can imagine there's a lot that can be done with these 3 alone. So in terms of modes, I ended up with a 2 out of 3. In terms of general support, I don't like the team too much. You get the Haunter to support you, and you get the Umbreon to support you. Maybe Stoutland if you want to have it fill the support role. What is nice is that you get the double Intimidate if you want to, or at least have the option to not always play one dedicated Intimidate mon, and also just mix things up, which makes you less predictable, of course. So yeah, in terms of general support, I think this is a 1. And in terms of offense, yeah, this team has a lot of physically hard-hitting Pokemon, but only 2 special attackers, if I'm not mistaken, which would be Sylveon and Rotom. So I think it's a bit lackluster on the specialty attacking side, but that could actually be fine. So I stick with a 2. And yeah, in terms of bulk, I think this team is quite bulky. Rotom can be super bulky. Umbreon is a bulk machine. Sylveon also especially bulky as heck. I think that's actually enough to argue for a 2 at least, and that's what I roll with the Hals Haxorus. Oh my god, I can't say words anymore.
Okay, great.
Maybe because I do the start of the next team, maybe I can continue now.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't mind.
Okay, so I just want to make it quick. For me, this team feels quite odd if I looked more deeply, because type-wise, it's kind of nice, but I think the synergy is not that good. I mean, you have the G-Max Sandaconda and the Garchomp with the Ice type weakness and the Decidueye. You have the Gyarados and the Blastoise with the Electric type weakness. You have the Umbreon and the Stoutland with the Fighting type weakness. The Gyarados and the Rotom, Kev told before, you can switch in Electric type moves, but if there is a Rock type move, then the Rotom is no switch in anymore. And yeah, then there is 3 Fairy type weaknesses in total, and so on and so forth. So I think it's kind of odd type wise. The team feels like they have good single Pokemon, but I don't think they synergize very well. The speed control, in my opinion, is maybe there. I mean, you have the Icy Wind, you have the Electro Webs and the Thunder Wave, and you can set up Dragon Dance and Tailwind and a quite odd Trick Room, and have a little bit of priority. But I think none of the speed control Pokemon aren't that good in better matchups. I mean, if you think about, a lot of teams have better speed control because they have faster Tailwind users, they have faster Thunder Wave users, they have Prankster, and so on and so forth, because the speed tiering overall in this team is not good in my opinion. The only good speed option they have is the Stoutland and the G-Max Anaconda, but the Sand is not instantly there, so you have to play around a little bit. So, and you have to set up a little bit, a Shell Smash, a Dragon Dance, and so on. I don't like that at all. So speed control wise, I give it a 1.5. Mode wise, besides the not instant Sand mode, and maybe a weakness proc possibility here, I don't see any mode at all, to be honest, because they have no Trick Room mode, really, because, I mean, Umbreon is not a Trick Room mode option, because it's kind of passive, besides you set it up, or, I don't know. So I think they have no real modes in this team. In my opinion, I see single Pokemon and not really much of modes and synergy here at all. The general support, yeah, is there maybe with Snarl, Yawn, Helping Hand, Priority, Weakness Policy, proc stuff, Will-O-Wisp, maybe Electro Web, Helping Hand, Fake Out. So there is some kind of support stuff here. I can see, or Charm, Baby Doll Eyes. But overall, I think it feels quite odd. So because those options I told here are split into a lot of Pokemon. So not Pokemon, none of those Pokemon is this best supporter here. Because the type synergy is not that good at all. And I give it a 1.5 in general support. Offensively, I only see Gyarados, Garchomp, and maybe that's it for power housing. Okay, Sylveon can quite intimidating if it's a Specs or Throat Spray variant. So 3 Pokemon that does instant pressure, in my opinion, offensively. Every other Pokemon needs a setup or is quite underwhelming on that regard. So I give it a 1.5 out of 3. And bulk-wise, I think this team is quite bulky, besides the Haunter. And okay, I have an Eviolite on the Girder. I give it a 2.5 out of 3. Because, I mean, Sylveon is not that bulky on the defensive side, but you can spread it to make it even bulkier. And every other Pokemon is quite bulky. And you can set up a lot of stuff to make it even more bulkier. So I come to a 2.5 out of 3 on the bulk side. So I come to total points of 10 and a grade of 5, which is, I looked over my whole point table. The team I give the lowest point grade overall. So yeah, I think it's in my opinion, it's not a team. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I will just do it really, really quick. Typing wise, I give it 2. It has a lot of typings, but I can't give a team without the best defensive typing in the game, which is the steel typing. Like, it's missing here, so I can't give it a better number than half of the points possible. So it's a 2 for me. Speed control wise, you have a very bad Tailwind user, but at least you have Tailwind, and you have a super bad Trick Room user, and your only other option is Airstream Gyarados and Icy Wind Blastoise. That's really it. So it's at a 1 at best, and it's only 1 because you have at least Trick Room and Tailwind. I guess Haunter can also Icy Wind, but like Haunter is not a good Pokemon. Mode-wise, I only give it the lowest I can give, 0.5, because like in singles, this would be decent. Like you have Pokemon that can switch into each other pretty decently, and you can stall out stuff. But this team does not have a single mode. With Follow Me, you would have a lot of modes. Not a lot of modes, but you would have these have threatening stuff. But without that, you don't have a mode at all. General support, I give a 1. Like the double yawn, the triple yawn stuff, even Helping Hand, Fake Out, double Intimidate, that's quite decent. However, like this team needs way more support with all the setup. It's more like setup and yeah, no support. Offensive-wise, even though there are only a few really threatening Pokemon like Garchomp and Gyarados, these are really, really threatening, especially Gyarados with Airstream and Moxie. So I can't go lower than a 1.5. However, everything else is really not that threatening offensively, so it can't be any higher. And bulk-wise, if this team has anything, it's bulk. Like, it's not super amazing, but like Gyarados with Intimidate and proper EV training, Garchomp with proper EV training, Blastoise, the double evolution, Rotom, they are all quite bulky. So I give it a 2, which is in total 8 points and a grade of 4. I think this team would be way better if you would have picked something like a Togetic or like a Togepi instead of the Sylveon, and would have picked a decent steel type like Aegislash or something like that for that as well, then you would have way better odds. However, I don't think this is something that you can't fix. Like with a few changes, all of these Pokemon that are really strong on their own could come together and form a pretty decent core. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Let's continue with the DSC Altaria Bielefeld.
Okay, thank you. Then I will continue. Yeah, with the DSC Altaria Bielefeld. Just look for a graphic here. So I will go on. And at first sight, if I see this team, I think, okay, it's Trick Room. So nearly everything about this team screams to me Trick Room. Because they have 3 Trick Room setter in total in this team. With the Aromatisse, the Gallade, and the Bubble. How is it called?
Reuniclus.
Yeah, thank you. The Reuniclus. And at least the Reuniclus and the Aromatisse are pretty decent GR setters. And what I do like is that they don't share the same typing. So they synergize very well. And overall, I see a Steelix, I see a Wigglytuff, and a Mandibuzz, which to me screams Trick Room. In the G-Mix tier, they picked the nearly maybe the best G-Mix Pokemon you can have, which is G-Mix Lapras. And they sniped a lot of teams with that, I would assume. Just because the G-Mix move gives you the Aurora Wheel, which makes this, I think, very decent bulky team even more bulkier. And on the other side, they have on the tier 1 pick, which is always as well a good Dynamax Pokemon, which is Dracozolt. So it's one of the most hard-hitting Pokemon, which have a very good typing, in my opinion. Especially if you combine the type synergy between Lapras and the Dracozolt, it's nearly perfect. And I really like that. So what they have in common as well is they have a Salazzle, which I really like, because Salazzle gives them the speed they needed, because they're lacking a lot of speed in my opinion here in this team. So it's very focusing on the lowest speed tiering, so in the Trick Room. I mean, the Dracozolt can set up max airstreams as well, of course. But with the 75 speed tiering, it's not that high, and even the Lapras has just only 60. So the Salazzle was kind of needed. And what they have here in combination is the Gallade, so they can go for a beat-up strat with the Gallade at least, or a beat-up strat with the weak armor Mandibuzz if they're trying to. The good thing about the beat-up with the Gallade is that they proc a weakness policy as well, if I'm not wrong. Oh, the type synergy
Beat up on what?
on the Gallade, on the Gallade.
No, it doesn't, because
fighting type. Okay, I'm kind of off with the type chart today. So, but at least they have the beat up strategy here. The Gallade adds kind of a weakness policy proc potential with the Shadow Sneak to maybe the Reuniclus, which can be a hard hitter as well. And Gallade overall has imprisoned you. I mean, not that their team needs to stop Trick Room, they kind of want it, but they have at least the option to imprison something, because the move pool on Gallade is very wide. What I don't like here is that Gallade is frail as well as the Salazzle is. And their tier 4 pick with the Pinsir has a flying type weakness as well, which is kind of odd with the Gallade in combination, in my opinion. And overall, I think they're lacking a lot of instantly pressuring Pokemon here. I mean, the Dracozolt is pressuring, of course, but they have to go maybe for the Dynamax or set a Gravity with the Wigglytuff, for example, to make the hustle work without the Dynamax. And the Lapras has not that big damage output. With the Life Orb, okay, it's fine. And with the Fake Tears option on the Salazzle, yeah, it's fine as well. I think the combination of Salazzle, Dracozolt, Lapras, and Reuniclus is totally fine in my opinion. But you have to be aware that your opponent can predict that quite easily. And yeah, the Fake Tears I like with the combination of Lapras and Reuniclus. The Aromatisse, in my opinion, is nice as well if you pair it with Lapras because of the Heal Pulse option you gain here, and you can do a Trick Room. You can, I mean, if you play it correctly, you can play around with the Ally Switch as well. Not that I would suggest to play Ally Switch at all, but this is an option because this team has no redirection otherwise. The Mandibus is, I mean, it's a bulky support Pokemon with Dog type, which is kind of cool in this team. Besides, it shares the Electric type weakness with the Lapras, but I think you can just play around that. But I think the Tailwind here, Mandibus is not the fastest Tailwind user. I mean, with a Prankster Pokemon, you can't touch it, which is kind of cool. But the Tailwind is kind of odd in my opinion. I mean, you can Tailwind for the Dracozolt, for the Glade, and maybe for the Pinsir. Yeah, but the overall team just kind of oriented on a Trick Room. And I think the Wigglytuff pick here is, I don't know, I don't get it directly. Maybe it's just because of the gravity, to set up the gravity. But overall, I think it has some similar functions as Aromatisse, but I think Aromatisse has a lower speed tier, which gives you the option to after you better than the Wigglytuff. The Heal Pulse, I think it's better on the Aromatisse than the Wigglytuff. So I don't get the Wigglytuff pick here. Maybe the other two mates here have other thoughts on it. Then they have the Gold King. I think only for the Lightning Rod, which kinda helps the Lapras to not get knocked out by an Electric type move or the Mandibus, but it shares the Grass type weakness with the Lapras as well, so it's not that safe of an option only to have the Lightning Rod, because and the Gold King not even gets a plus out of the Lightning Rod because mostly it's physical typing. I mean, you can play it special, of course, but in most cases it's you play it physically. I don't know. I think it can learn Soak, if I'm not mistaken.
It does.
It does, which adds at least an option for the Dracozolt here. But because it's not the fastest Pokemon, I don't know if you are able to trigger the Soak and make use of it. Maybe you have to Scarf it, but even then there is an option that it gets faked out and you never been able to make the Soak happen. But at least it is an option. The Steelix here, I mean, I kind of like Steelix combined with Dusclops because you have the ability to play Trick Room and the Bulldoze to proc the Weakness Policy on the Steelix, because in my experience only then it can do a lot of damage, because otherwise Steelix is kind of underwhelming on the damage side. I mean, you can set it up with Curse, for example, to make it even more physical bulkier and to set up his offensive pressure a little bit and to play it even better around in the Trick Room. But it's very setup oriented in my opinion. So what I do really like about this team is the GMX Lapras and the Dracozolt and the Reuniclus and the Salazzle and the Aromatisse. But the other Pokemon feel kinda odd to me. And I think maybe the opponent is able to predict or to prep for this team really good, besides of the G-Mix Lapras and Draco Salt. This is why I would give them a 2.5 typing wise, because I think they're lacking. They have a double typing with the fairy typing. They have dual water typing, and they're missing. What do they missing? Fire, water, grass, core. The grass
Grass,
Pokemon
Ghost, and
is-
Rock.
Yeah. So ghost and grass, in my opinion, is very important in the draft league. The rock you can ignore kinda. But I think the grass typing would be cool as a pivoting option. And it resists the ground weakness. It resists the grass type weakness and electric type weakness. So it would fit very well in this team. And I think they're lacking that a little bit. This is why I would give it 2.5, because I think there's improving potential here for potential switches. Speed control wise, like I said, I think they have some speed control here with the Tailwind, and the Trick Room, and maybe a Paralysis which is going around. But other than that, I can't see. I mean, they can set up a little bit, like the weak armor stuff also, but in general, I don't think there is a lot of good speed control here upgoing, so I would even reduce my scoring here to 1.5 out of 4. Mode-wise, I told some modes here, but I think there are not a lot of them really going here, because a lot of them rely on setting up. And maybe if the opposing side has a redirection with Follow Me or Rage Powder, because they have no grass type, there is no ignoring on that, and maybe this is a problem here. In general support, I think there is a lot of Pokemon which have kind of a similar support role here. And they have 3 powerhouses maybe, and that's it. For the support, I clearly can see the Manibus and the Aromatisse, but they're kind of passive as well, in my opinion. So in general support, I would give them a 1.5 out of 3 as well, because I think there is lacking a lot of support options here, even though they have some modes. On the offensive side, like I said, the Dracozolt, the Salazzle, the Rheaniclus, and maybe the Pinsir. But I think that's it. For everything else, you need to set up. Bulk-wise, so I would give it a 1.5 out of 3 on the offensive side. And on the bulk side, I would say because of G-Mix Lapras option, and Dracozolt is natural bulky, Aromatisse as well, and the Manibus, and the Rheaniclus, and the Steelix as well, and maybe the Wigglytuff. I think there's bulk there, and they can set up even more bulk with the Aurora Wheel and the Curse option, and screen options they have in general. So I personally would give them a 2.5 out of 3, because you have to be able to break through this wall. So I came to total points of 11 and a grade of 5.5. But I have not a lot to say about this team.
Okay, great. Then I would just go quickly through the scoreboard. So typing wise, it's for me a 2.5. They have a lot of typings, but similar to last team, they lack a very crucial typing in grass, which is part of a very important core. And ghost typing is also important, so I would give it 2.5, which is solid. Speed control wise, I don't agree with R.EX at all. It's for me a 3.5. It was nearly close to a 4. Like, yes, they don't have a really, like, they can't really get much out of a Tailwind, but the goal of this team is clearly Trick Room, and they have very, very solid way to get the Trick Room off. Probably 2 of the best Trick Room setters like Reuniclus. It has the Magic Guard, and Overcoat, which can ignore a lot of stuff that prevents Trick Room, and Aromatisse with the aura availability prevents Taunt as well, so it's really hard to stop these two from getting up Trick Room. And then it's also the Fake Out option for the Leather, so the only real way is having a Ghost type Trick Room Prison one or something like that, and even then Celeste can taunt it. So that's really, really good. They can get up Trick Room very, very reliable. And the only thing like the team would need for me would be something like a copycat user, so they could go for max Trick Room with Reuniclus copycat, and then they would have even more options to get up the Trick Room. But as it's right now, I give it a 3.5, which is very solid. Mode-wise, I give it a 2. Like, the problem is, although they get their Trick Room up really reliable, Trick Room is really their only real mode. So they don't have a super fast mode. Like Dracozolt is kind of fast, but only in the sand, and they don't have a really good way to get up the sand. So yeah, it's kind of one-dimensional in that regard. General support, they have good support for the Trick Room to get the Trick Room up, but other than that, there's no Intimidate. There's Fake Tears on Aromatisse and Celeste for the Lapras, but after that it really stops. Mandibus is kind of fine for Snarl support and Taunt and stuff like that, but like you could definitely improve on that regard. Offensive wise, I give it a 2. Like the only real hard hitters are Lapras and Dracozolt, and as I said, these two are with the time pretty one-dimensional. Like you know what they want to do, and if you can check them, the team really struggles to deal massive damage. Like Steelix is fine, because both Trick Room setters and Reuniclus and Aromatisse both get Drain Punch to proc the policy if you really want to. So that's fine, but like Steelix needs some setup. Like there's no real instant pressure, and both of the main damage dealer rely on the Dynamax to do massive damage. Bulk-wise, like it's a Trick Room team with Lapras, obviously it's a 2.5. What's missing is the Grass type to make the switch capabilities a little bit better, and maybe an Intimidate to make it even bulkier, but it's still a solid 2.5 on the bulk side with 14 points in total and a grade of 7. So Kev, you have the word.
Yeah, I just figured I was muted, sorry. Picking that up quickly and also just rushing through the scoreboard because it gets late. Typing wise, I gave the Bielefelds a 2 out of 4. I think not too many types are missing here, but as one of the missing types is the crucially missing grass type, and this team also kinda is a bit weak to grass, I only gave the 2 out of 4. Then we've got the speed control. I think the speed control is quite strong, as Chulainn just explained. That is one of the best Trick Room modes you can have, and this team really loves its Trick Room. So I think it can easily get that set up if it really wants to, and can benefit from the Trick Room being up a lot. So this definitely is really nice speed control. I think the options there also have already been explored, so not much to add. And then in terms of modes, I think because there's only one real, actual mode with the Trick Room, after a time it gets easy to prepare for this team. I don't think it's necessarily bad to just have one dedicated strong mode, but as the nature of a draft league is playing 10 weeks or so in a row with the same-ish teams, I mean, you can do some trades and so on, but that doesn't drastically mix up things. After some time, it just gets predictable what you're going to do, and especially, of course, if you're a creator, if your match gets posted or whatever, then it's kind of easy to predict what your mode is going to do, and your opponent can prepare exactly for that. And if they have a favorable matchup anyways, it probably gets an auto-win kind of for them. So, although the mode is really strong and it's also well executed in the draft, I only give a 2 out of 3. There's some nice sneaky side stuff that you can do, like beat up Gallade and stuff like that. But that, in my opinion, doesn't justify the 3 out of 3. Then in terms of general support, I think the team is a bit lackluster. You've got a bit stuff, few bits and bobs here and there, but overall only a 1 out of 3 for me. There's just too many things missing. In terms of offense, I think you do have some mons that can go quite strong, and because the team gets super bulky, you maybe have the chance, an actual chance to do some setup that you need to become a bit more offensive in the mons that are not naturally offensive. So not a 1, but also not a 3. I think a 2 is quite justified here. And then in terms of bulk, I mean, it's damn G-Max Lapras. It doesn't get any bulkier than that, basically, with the auto screens that you get there, kind of. So I think it's not yet a 3, and because, there's the grass type, which if there would be a grass type, I think I would confidently give a 3. With this, I'm super torn between 2 and 3, but because I don't give half points, I only gave a 2 here, and this adds up to a total of 12 reached points, which is a grade of 6.
Okay, great. Anything else to add, or can I just continue with the Mediocre Mudkips?
Yeah, just one last thing. I think R.EX questioned in the beginning why they picked Wigglytuff, and I think that's actually just because of Frisk. I was considering Wigglytuff as well, and was eyeing with that Frisk ability. I think that's the only reason why you would pick it up here, and I think it's not too shabby.
I mean, I picked it last season as competitive. It is also kind of viable, and I was hoping to do some stuff with it. In the end, it never really came, because I always had some better options, but Wigglytuff is definitely fine. Also has a unique typing, and you can do certain stuff with it. It's one of the best checks to Dragapult in the game, as it's immune to both steps, and competitive just boosts it up. And
the gravity option for Dragapult is there as well.
Yeah.
So it does some things on the team, but I don't know. Not the strongest pick.
I just want to add, because of the Trick Room mode is that strong here. I mean, you mentioned you have only the option to imprison or so, but you can Roar or Whirlwind as well. I forgot the moves, I know, but just to add it.
Yeah, very true. Okay, so the Mediocre Mudkips. This is the team that after round 7 or 8, I was confidently saying would become the best team in the draft, and then the last rounds were kinda lackluster. So this is basically the team that I was most hyped for, and then dropped my expectations a little bit. However, it's still a really, really strong team. I would just go through the mons, starting with the G-Max one. G-Max Machamp. I think G-Max Machamp is kinda underrated, but at the same time kinda it's a little bit too hyped. Some people really love it. As it was introduced, people were crazy in building with it, but in reality, the G-Max move is not as good. It's basically a worse Max Knuckle for Machamp. Getting up to crit rate is fine, but at the same time, Machamp doesn't have anything that really benefits from it. Yes, you can run Scope Lens, I guess, but most times Machamp wants to run other items. And in general, it's the same base power as Max Knuckle, and having an attack boost would be way more beneficial for it than the increased crit rate. After Dynamax, you can go for Cross Chop, but it's really hard to get 4 attacks with Machamp. And if you don't have great partners that really like increased crit rate, the Gigantamax move is kind of wasted. However, it's a really decent pick for T3. Gives a great typing, great abilities, and just gives you more points to work with. So there's nothing wrong about that. So then we have Incineroar. I don't think I have to say anything about Incineroar. It's probably the
disgusting.
Best. Yeah, it's disgusting. It's probably the best support in the game. It has Fake Out, Parting Shot, Taunt, Intimidate, great typing, great stats. You can do so many things with it. There's a reason why it was on 90% of the team spec in 2019, and now it's also on nearly every real competitive team. Like Incineroar is just super strong. It doesn't really have a big downside at all. Latios, another great Pokemon, great typing, great ability, very good speed stat, very good bulk, has recover, has tailwind, has does it also have trick room? I'm not really sure. It has icy wind, it has Baldos, heal pulse, healing wish, it has all the options in the world, it has Calm Mind. It's really strong. It can also go offensive with Life Orb, and I really like it. It gives you so many options. And then there's the Milotic. Milotic, one of my favorite Pokemons ever. The ability is super good in competitive. However, in draft leagues, you often don't need competitive and can even go for Marvel scale to make up for the otherwise a little bit lackluster defensive stat if you don't want to run a coil set. However, Milotic can at the same time go very offensive with a Life Orb or weakness policy or anything else you want. It's a really diverse Pokemon. Also gives you Icy Wind options, and Milotic is just a Pokemon. If you get rid of the answers to it, it's really hard to KO. Jolteon, one of the best tier 3 picks, really fast, good typing, okay-ish move pool, just a very fast hitting electric type Pokemon that also can grab some momentum with Volt Switch and gives you a really nice speed benchmark. Serena, I think one of the best tier 3 picks as well, like solid grass type, solid stats, really good ability, like being immune to priority moves with your whole team is really valuable. It's with the stupid looking fish, the only Pokemon that can provide that. And that's really valuable. Also another option to pivot around, like you have Jolteon, Incineroar and Serena already for pivoting, which is really valuable. It has helping hand support and a solid attack set as well, so you can do a lot of stuff with Serena. Then we have the tier 4 type Null. I honestly don't know too much about it. Like, I know it gets way less moves than Silvally, and it has like the same stats, but the speed is way lower. However, I don't know. I've never really used Type Null. Every time I looked at it, it was kind of lackluster, and I'm looking forward what he does with it. However, since he also has Clefairy, and I don't think Type Null has, like, I think it really wants Eviolite. So I don't. And most times you want to bring your Clefairy. I don't see that you will bring Type Null that often. Speaking of Clefairy, he also has Clefairy. Like, he already has Fake Out immunity, he has Fake Out, he has Intimidate, he has Intimidate block, and now he has also Redirection and Friend Guard to make him even bulkier. Like, that's such an amazing pick. Like, he has pretty much every real support option you want to have in VGC with Intimidate, Fake Out, Pivoting, and Follow Me. Clefairy also has Helping Hand. It has so many good options, and he got one of the best partners for it. One of my favorite Pokemon from last season, from the first season of the UGA, Excadrill. Amazing typing, ground and steel gives you a step to the two of the best max moves to also increase the bulk on your team. Like, for example, giving the boost on Milotic or Latios to create some very nasty end games where they, like, you only can hope for critting them to win the game. And pair super well with Clefairy. Clefairy covers the major weaknesses, like fighting weakness at least, and provides you options to set up your Sword Stance and then Dynamax and so on and so on. And Excadrill has another great part on the team with Gigalith, giving Excadrill the instant speed if you really want to. Also, Gigalith adds the new typing, the rock typing, really solid, and gives you a solid Trick Room one. Like, now you have a very fast one with Excadrill and Jolteon and Latios, but you also have a really slow one with Gigalith, even slower than some other Trick Room ones like Amoonguss or Snorlax or some other stuff. And then you have a decent Trick Room setter in Porygon. Porygon is fine. It's decently bulky with Eviolite. You can also run Focus Sash. However, speaking of Eviolite, it's the third Eviolite user. Like, his last two picks were, I think, Type Null and Porygon, and I was like, why would you pick them if you already have Clefairy? I think there were better options. Like, I see Type Null and Porygon individual as decent picks, but I would never pick both of them. Like, they are both in the same tier. They are both normal types. They are both Pokemon that want in Eviolite. I don't get that. I think there would have been better Trick Room setters, even Trick Room setters that can proc Policy on Gigalith. So these two are the Pokemons I would swap out for better stuff. So now let's come to the scoreboard. Typing wise, I only can give a 2.5. I wouldn't believe that as I watched the draft that this team would only be a 2.5, but now how it's ended, like he's missing Ice, Ghost, Bug and Flying, Bug and Poison, so 5 typings are missing, and he has a lot of singular typings and like double, like basically 2 Pokemon which are the same in Type Null and Porygon, so I don't think having so many single types with such a bulky team is really good. Like, you sometimes struggle to switch into each other. Also the missing typings, I only can give a 2.5, which is a fair point. Speed control wise, like, it's definitely a 4, like there's no deny. He has Trick Room as an option, he has Tailwind, Icy Wind, Baldos, he has Fake Out to make sure that he gets the Trick Room up, he has Follow Me to make sure that he gets that up, he has Icy Wind on Clefairy, he has the instant speed with Gigalith, Excavate, Jolteon can go for Electro Weapon, Milotic can go for Icy Wind, Incineroar can even go for Baldos. Like, pretty much everyone on this team has a speed control option. The only thing that's missing is a max airstream user, like a good flying type. So I could go to 3.5, which I honestly will do now that I think about it, because having no airstream user is not ideal. Modes wise, like, this team has so many modes. You can go for the Milotic Latios endgames, you can go Trick Room mode, you can go Policy on Excadrill. Like, Excadrill on its own provides a billion modes, especially paired with Clefairy. You can't really prepare for it, and you can pivot a lot around with your pivot options. Yeah, I think there are like way too much modes to talk about today. It's easily a 3. General support, as I said, you have every support option in VGC you want. You can block priority, you have Intimidate, you have Fake Out, Helping Hand, Follow Me, and so on and so on. Easily a 3. Offensive wise, it's for me a 2.5. Like, Excadrill is really offensive. Gigalith, but Gigalith needs some type of setup. Jolteon is decently offensive, and that's really it. Like, Latios is okayish, Milotic can do damage, but Machamp kinda does damage, yeah, but it's hard because this team doesn't have, like, normally you want an airstream user on your team to make sure you can steamroll the opponent over and over again, but this team doesn't have it, so this makes the offensive capabilities like a little bit worse than it otherwise would be, so it's only a 2.5 for me. And bulk wise, easily a 3. I like Clefairy and Incineroar provides so many bulk for the team overall, and like the team has good options to switch into each other. Has, like, none of these Pokemon are really glass cannon. Every one of these Pokemon has at least some bulk other than Jolteon, so you can definitely EV each of these Pokemon to survive specific attacks. So it's easily a 3 out of 3, which is in total 17.5 reach points for the Mediocre Mudkips, which is very solid. However, I think it can be very easily improved if you find better Pokemon for Type Null and Porygon. And yeah, that's all I have to say about the team.
Alright, then I'll just keep the ball rolling because it's my turn with the next team actually, and I want a small break in between. I'll do it quick. Once again, typing-wise, the Mediocre Mudkips, I can only give them a 2, also based on what I did with other teams. There's just some important typings missing, have already been pointed out. Ice and Flying, for example, you kind of want to have those on your team, especially the Flying type, of course, for the additional speed control. And this brings me to the next point. It's actually the only thing that I see missing in terms of speed control everything else is looking extremely solid for the mediocre Mudkips. But because there's no airstream, I think it can easily happen that your opponent gets to outspeed you, even though their speed control might be a bit worse, because they might have the ability to set up airstreams and then after 2 or 3 turns get the pacing into their favor. So that's only quote-unquote a 3 out of 4. In terms of modes, I completely agree with Chulainn. It's incredible what this team can potentially do. There's a huge variety in my opinion, and also having the Clefairy to ensure that you can actually do almost anything that you really want to do is amazing. So that's, in my opinion, one of the best pickups in this team. Next, we've got the general support. That, in my opinion, is a 2 out of 3. It could be a bit better. You get a lot of support. But in my opinion, the main support Pokemon on this team is Incineroar, which is already a great support. You can't argue with that. But you could add a few more details here and there to make it even better. And as Chulainn said, with the last few picks, with the tier 4 that has been brought into this team, I think these points could have been used a bit better to mitigate the missing support. In terms of offense, I think I'll go with the 3 points out of 3 points, because this team can hit really hard, it has a lot of offensive capabilities, and it can become easy for the mediocre Mudkips to steamroll their opponents in terms of offensive power if they want to and if they play it out correctly. I think I would be more with a 2.5 in this case, but as I said before, I don't give half points, so this is a 3 for me. And same goes for bulk. I think I would be with a 2.5 again, but rounding this up, because I think there's a lot of bulk potential in this team. You can play a lot of mons really bulky if you use the spreads to your favor. You get the friend guard to protect your ally Pokemon on the field. You've got the Incineroar to mitigate and suppress the opposing physical attackers. All the good stuff. You get screens and so on. So I think there's a lot in the team to make it bulky and to survive for a prolonged time in a battle if you really want to. Which leads me to a total of 16 points, or the grade of 8. And now I pass word to R.EX.
Okay, thank you very much. I make it quick as well. Type-wise, I have a 2 points out of 4, just because I think they're lacking some typings, and what I kind of find odd is the ground and fighting type weakness, which is in a red in this team. I mean, they can play around, I guess, but it's kind of obvious. Speed control wise, I think they have a lot of speed control stuff here ongoing. But I think they'll still lacking, besides of the Jolteon, a better speed tiering overall. I think there's some gaps, and they could be outspeeded from opponents if they're not aware of quite easily. Even though they have the Sand mode in the Jolteon, they can get overrolled by an opposing fast mode, or maybe a better Trick Room mode as well, because of this inner rend, ground, and fighting type weakness. Mode wise, I think it's kind of it depends on how would you define modes, because I think just focusing on 2 or 3 Pokemon, for me it's not enough to give them a total points of 3. Just personally, I think here some modes are ongoing, but not every Pokemon or not every pairing has a mode together. So I think there's some Pokemon here which are just doing their job and not doing. It's not a mode they can play around, like the Sand mode or the Trick mode mid after you and some things. So I give it a 2 point out of 3. General support, I think here's everything you need. Nothing to add. Of the before sentences. Offensively, I think here is a lot of ongoing. I think G-Max Machamp is hits like a truck, especially if it's guts boosted. And if the crits happens, then there's a lot of damage ongoing. The Incineroar, I think it's kind of underrated as an offensive mon. With a weakness policy or a Swordsend option here, they have with the Clefairy as a redirection option. I think Incineroar can as well hit like a truck. The Ladi is offensively very strong. The Jolteon, if someone saws like Wolfie plated, it can do a lot of damage as well. The Gigalith and Excadrill with a base of 130 hit like a truck as well. So Serena is very strong. The Milotic, yeah, it needs some setup, but I think they have some options to play around and give Milotic a way to shine even offensively. So I give it a 3 out of 3 because you have to be aware of a lot of damage output here, even though it's mostly physical. So maybe this team is kind of Intimidate weak. And I see a Landorus as a big threat. Bulk-wise, I think this team overall is very bulky. I mean, they can even, like Chulainn said, the Excadrill is a very potent mon to give the def and the spets def boost as well. So it's very strong. They can set up screens if they want. The Intimidate, the Snarl options are there. So yeah, I think the bulk is 3 out of 3. So I come to a total points of 16.5 and a grade of 8.25.
Alright, great. This leaves us only with the Inglorious Surfers, and since Kev has the last word and R.EX just told us something about the Mediocre Mudkips, I will just continue with the Inglorious Surfers if no one has anything against it. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, I will just go to the scoreboard. Typing, it's for me a 2. Like, it has some good typings, but Grass, Electric and Ghost are missing, which is super important. Poison and Bug, as we already mentioned, is not super important, but these 3 are so important. Honestly, I want to go down to 1. No, I rated some similar teams with a 2, so I will go with 2 as well. Speed control wise, it's for me a 1.5 at best. Like, Sigilyph makes up for a lot of things. It's similar to Articuno Galar. It has Trick Room, Tailwind and Imprison, which is really cool. It also has Icy Wind. But other than that, there's not much speed control here. Like, yes, Dracofush, Sandrush kinda is the speed control, but only for itself. Same goes for Herdia. And Dugtrio, Baldos, but you don't have a really good mon that is immune to Baldos other than Sigilyph. And then there's like Jinx with Icy Wind stuff, and I guess Grimmsnarl with Scary Face, but that's really it. And all of these options are not super ideal. I think, like, if you have a mon that is immune to Scary Face, Prankster, you can just outpace this team super easily. Modes wise, I honestly don't see modes at all. Like, Tyranitar Dracovic is a combination, and I guess Herdia can surf proc a policy on Tyranitar, but that's really it. Like, you can proc beat up on Lucario with Dugtrio, but I can't really call this mode. Like, these are niche combinations, but it's not like a real mode that you have. You don't have a good Trick Room mode. Like, Copperata is fine, but like, Sigilyph is your only Trick Room set, and it's base 97, and you don't have like Follow Me to make sure it gets the Trick Room up, and it's not super bulky. So you can, like, if Copperata is a threat to you, you can just put all your butts into the into KOing the Sigilyph, and then it's GG. So yeah, I just don't see really good modes. Like, Jinx could go something with Dry Skin skill swap stuff, but I don't know. It's not really anything. Like, it's better than the Hals Haxorus because you at least have some good combinations other than singular mons, but that's really it. General support, Honestly, there's not a lot other than Grimmsnarl and Herdia Intimidate and like Jinx Fake Out, but that's really it. But Grimmsnarl alone has so many support options that I think it's fine to give it a 1.5. Offensive wise, it's similar to the Hals Haxorus. Like you don't have a lot of good offensive ones, but the ones you have is Dracovish, Tyranitar, and Damanitan, and all of these hits like a truck. And these three alone can pull a lot of weight. Not everything, but enough to make up for something. So it's a 1.5 for me. Bulk-wise, you have screens, you have Tyranitar, which is super bulky, and you have Corporaja. And that's really it. You don't have more bulk. Like Damanitan is a glass cannon, Lucario is kinda glass cannon, Jinx as well. Dugtrio is super glass cannon. Like, I don't get this. Like, it's like you have Bajillion Sash users or Squishy Mons. 1.5 is really good for that. Like, I could also go 1, but having Intimidate and Screens make up for something. And yeah, overall it's a 9 for me. Like, the oddest pick I see is the Golduck. Like, why would you pick Golduck if you have Dracovish? You don't have Rain. Like, you can set up Rain with Dracovish, but why should I do that if I have Sandrush? And, like, Cloud9 doesn't benefit at all for your team. Like, you get rid of your own Sand effect. Like, that's by far the oddest pick on this team. And yeah, that's all I have to say. And see you at the end of the video. You
So
guys can continue.
I think I will continue then, and Kev can close the video today. Yeah, I'm kind of struggling to give points to this team, to be honest, because I think the typings are pretty strange, because you have dual typings with the Jinx, Zigglyph, the Dracovish, the Golduck, then you have 2 steel types. The type synergy is not as good. I mean, the ground type weakness is kind of inherent. You have the fighting type weakness is very potent here. So I don't know. The pivoting options are nearly 0 sometimes, I would say. So, and lacking a lot of good switch-ins and typings. The grass type, I think, is, well, even though electric, but aggressive would be awesome in this team, because then you could, even though make something from the soak option you have with Golduck, which I can't see at all here. How would you can benefit of that option you could have? Speed control. I mean, you have one Trick Room setter which doesn't want to run in Trick Room. The only thing which can run in Trick Room potentially is the Corporaja. You have this Sand mode with the Herdia, but the Herdia isn't that fast of a Pokemon, so you have the Sandrush for Herdia and Dracovish. Maybe combined with the Tyranitar is an option. You have maybe Scary Face with Grimmsnarl and Fake Out stuff. Or you can bulldoze with this with Dugtrio and Icy Wind with the Jinx. So there are some options here. Because of that, I would give, and the Max Airstream you have of clearly with Zigglyph. So I would give them a 2 out of 4. Mode wise, I would agree with Chulainn. There is not a lot going here. I mean, you have the beat up option, of course. You maybe can Brutal Swing or Sucker Punch to proc a weakness policy on the Zigglyph, which is an option. And the Sand mode is there, of course. Maybe there's a Perish option here, but it's not as bulky team that you can make use of it. I can't see clearly modes here. I would give it 1 out of 3. General support, I think, is there, so I would give them a 2.5 or 2. I think I have to be fair and give it a 2 out of 3. The offense here, I mean, the Corporaja can do damage, the Damanitan, of course, can do as well, the Tyranitar can do, and the Dracovish. All of them are kind of weak to Intimidate. and to, at least besides of the Domination, to Will-O-Wisp. The beat up Lucaria is an option, but because the ground type weakness is not that low here in that team, it's maybe not that potent, because the opposing side can just prepare for it easily. So I would give them offensively. The Sigilyph is always a threat in my opinion. And a Grimstall you can Dynamax as well. I think I would give them a 2 out of 3 because I can see some potentially, and a Draco Wish on its own with Bandit, Fish's Friend maybe in Rain if you can set it up is a big threat. But there is something which is the bulk, and the bulk in this team is kind of odd. Some Pokemon can be pretty bulky, for example Tyranitar, or if you set up screens. And the Cabrajam, I think on the defensive side is not that bad. Herdier, I know from experience, it's a very bulky Pokemon, especially with the Eviolite and the Snarl, Charm, and Baby Doll Eyes, and Intimidate option. So I would give the team, even though they have a Jinx and a Dugtrio, a 2 out of 3. So I came to total points from 10.5 and a grade of 5.25.
All right. Thanks for your judgments, and I'll close the word with the Inglorious Surfers today. Although they were my second team to look at, I think I'll also make it a bit faster because it's quite late. I think we are almost at the same time, or maybe even a tad longer than the last video right now, and we wanted to be faster. To be fair, we did analyze one more team, so I think we were a tad faster, but not really. So let's try to not make it too long. Inglorious Surfers, I initially really liked that team, and I also really liked the mons they picked during the draft. I think there's a lot of also individual mons that I like. For example, Lucario or Grimmsnarl. Copperajah, kind of a cool tier 3 G-Max pick in my opinion. I also really like the Sigilyph, but overall, this team didn't, it felt like it didn't close it out the way it wanted to. And some snipes might have come in clutch here, and I know they got sniped a few times, so maybe that is part of the reason why some of the picks are not fitting as well as they could. Maybe this is something that can be solved by trades during the season. As for typing of the Inglorious Surfers, I think a 2 out of 4 is justified. Electric and Grass being missing is super crucial already, but then you also don't have a Ghost type. And additionally to that, you have a quite glaring ground type weakness. So yeah, this is a bit lackluster. It's not the worst in the world. You can probably play around it if you are well aware of that. But at the same time, if your opponent is well aware of that, they can also make this their biggest advantage and very favorable for them. So that's only a 2 out of 4 in my opinion. In terms of speed control, I don't see it as bad as my two colleagues here, because the Jinx also gets Trick Room and has a quite nice way to set Trick Room because of the Oblivious ability and you're not being able to taunt it then. But at the same time, there's two major reasons why this might not be the best idea. First, I thought Jinx was way slower because it looks super big and fat and slow, but it's actually fast. It's like 95 base speed, so it also doesn't want to be in Trick Room after it has set up the Trick Room. And at the same time, it also has a lot of weaknesses. So it gets quite easy to just get rid of Jinx before it gets the Trick Room up. So it's not really a threat and not really... if you cannot protect it, you probably won't get the Trick Room up, even though there's usually a great ability to get it up. Then, which leaves me to an overall point of 2 out of 4 for speed control. I really like the option with Sigilyph. This is something that can be quite nice So having the option to do both Tailwind and Trick Room on the same mon is really neat, in my opinion. I think there will be some niche matchups where the Inglorious Surfers can actually quite use Trick Room on Sigalith because their opponent won't necessarily expect it, and then it doesn't become a match of who gets the Trick Room, the Tailwind up first, and who plays better under the Tailwind or whatever, getting in additional max airstreams and blah blah blah, but rather a mind game of, oh, is he going to set the Trick Room now or not? And this can be quite advantageous for the Surfers, in my opinion. So yeah, as I said, I don't see it as bad as Chulainn and R.EX maybe. So I'll stick with the 2. As for modes, I like a lot of individual Pokemon on this team, and I like a lot of modes that have been started in this team. The beat-up Lucario option is interesting. However, there's only one beat-up user, which is Dugtrio. So Dugtrio is quite fast. I guess you can get up the beat-up reliably with that one. But at the same time, what are you going to do with Dugtrio afterwards? I'm not sure. Maybe there's good reasons to fit the Dugtrio on this team. But maybe not. And then, as for Trick Room, you can go that route, but you also don't have the slowest mons on the team. There's the Copperaja, which can play under Trick Room, but that's about it. So not really a strong mode to see here. You do have kind of a speedy route with getting Tailwind up, getting Sand up with Tyranitar, and you also have the Sand mode in a way. And I do kind of like the Sand mode here, and it also synergizes quite well. So there's a lot of mons that aren't hit by Sand chip damage and so on because they are ground type, rock type, steel type, or whatever. That works quite well. But at the same time, this also leads to them having the anti-synergy in terms of having a lot of ground type weaknesses. So yeah, not too sure about the mode here, but I think I stick with a 2 out of 3. In terms of general support, there's a bit of stuff that you can do. You have the option to bring the Cloud9 Golduck, which is nice. You've got Intimidate on Herdia, not too shabby. You've got Jinx, which can bring a lot of different support moves. You've got Grimmsnarl, who's arguably one of the best screen setters in the game. So yeah, it's hard to go beneath a 2, but I also don't want to go higher. So solid 2 in my opinion. In terms of offense, this team could be extremely offensive if it had something to tie together the synergies, the singular individual synergies that I see in this team. As has been said, there's a lot of heavy hitters like Dracovish, Tyranitar. These alone can destroy mons like one by one. But if they are on their own for too long, you're just gonna lose them and also lose the game in return. So if there was something to enable them to really steamroll the opponent, then I think this would easily be a 3. But the way it currently is, it's just a 2. And in terms of bulk, there's a bit of bulk. Most of the bulk inherently comes from setting up screens. So that's a bit lackluster because you're really reliant on the screens then. And the few Pokemon that you have that are bulky, I mean, Tyranitar is kind of bulky, Copperaja is kind of bulky, and the rest, yeah, they have never heard of bulk. And there's a huge glaring ground type weakness. So it's just a 1. It's may even be close to a 0, but I don't think it's less than 0.5, and it would be like you still got too much bulk for a 0. And if you can switch up those ground type weaknesses, you can also become much bulkier. So I see a lot of potential to improve here. And I think the 1 is nice. Which leads me to 11 points overall for our last team, the Inglorious Surfers, ending the draft analysis with a final grade of 5.5. So thanks everybody for listening in and doing this with us. It was great fun for us to do this analysis of the whole Kalos Division. Once again, in the second season this time, we kind of blew the scope and made it I don't know, I guess almost 6 hours in the end, which is
Close to
extremely,
that, yeah.
which is extremely crazy and insane if you think about it. But it also was a lot of fun, and I guess I also speak for Chulainn and R.EX if I say this. We are really looking forward to the season, and there's a lot of banger teams in our division. And as we already said in the Discord, if we rated your team a bit harsh or a bit lower than others, there's definitely no hard feelings involved, and it's just our personal opinion. And, you know, especially if you've got a bit lower rating, then that's your time to shine and to surprise us and pay it all back when you face us during the season. So
you can beat Kev and R.EX to prove that, but you can still lose to me. That would
exactly.
be really nice. That would be really, really nice.
So show us your revenge when we face in the regular season. And just thanks everybody for listening in. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to subscribe to Chulainn, make sure to subscribe to R.EX, and if you want to, also subscribe to me. And I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks a lot, and bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Stay healthy.
Hey, das ist mein